So, what happens if somebody is suffering from chronic stress? What is the long term impact on health, mind, all of that?
We want everything in life. We want name, we want fame, we want money, we want love, we want happiness, but we don't know how to get it. And when we don't get something, we are stressed. I say the life is like an iceberg. The 20% of the iceberg is looking visible, and we're living only that life. Now my question to everyone today here, the youngsters or the elders, how much are we engaging with other people in our lives? The prefrontal cortex is the action brain. When you start doing the work that you really want to do, the lizard brain becomes very quiet. And as the nerve cell number is decreasing, the dementia and the Alzheimer's is coming at an early age.
Is it going to be help if we try to learn something new?
Absolutely.
Do a degree or do a certification?
Absolutely. There is a part of neuroscience called neuroart.
What happens to our body if we are sleep deprived for a long period of time? Because the targets is like a moving goalpost. Today you have to get 100K, tomorrow you have to get 200K. So how do you deal with this situation? This is a pretty serious problem in today's world. Good morning, good evening. Let me start this episode by talking about Atul. Atul is a sales manager at an MNC. He is a star performer. Every time his team comes out on top in most of the quarterly sales review meetings. And he also earns a handsome incentive most of the quarters. But as he turned 40, he confided in one of his close friends, I don't think I'll be able to continue like this. I'm feeling exhausted. I feel that I'm actually always performing and not living my life at all. And this is not an isolated case. So being a top performer is like a magnet. Everybody is attracted towards it. But nobody talks about the emotional cost. It remains hidden. So let me ask you a question. Is it possible to be ambitious, to be successful, and yet have control on your lives? Welcome to a brand new episode of Future Forward, a podcast series by Tech Canvas on artificial intelligence, business analysis, and data analytics. Every week, we invite an expert to have an in-depth discussion on a topic. This week, something interesting is on the menu. We're going to talk about how to strive under pressure and excel in a high-stress corporate career. And to talk about that, our guest is a doctor, author, and NLP practitioner. She's helping transform workplaces to make it more harmonious through the power of emotional intelligence and others. She's also a global keynote speaker, and her most recent talk was at Trailblazers, New Zealand. She's the author of Shukriya Zindagi, Grail, Happy Couples, and Raising Daughters and Shaping Leaders. These are all books authored by her. She's also the founder of Hope and Endocrine Center in Mumbai. She also runs a happiness school for last 20 plus years. Let's welcome Dr. Alka Chadha. Hi, welcome to the episode.
Thank you. Thank you. It's really a privilege for having me here.
Yeah, great. So it is something which is a pretty universal problem which we are facing on day-to-day life. So I thought we need to have one episode, and I wanted to do it for some time. Okay, so thanks for coming here. So let's start by talking about yourself a little more. I have talked about a bit. Can you just give us a little more insight into your professional career and life?
So I'm a full-time practicing medical doctor for the last 30 plus years. And my happiness, my actually coming into the world of professional speaking is pretty recent, 2.5 to 3 years. It was like a peep I wanted to do into the professional speaking world. I learned a lot from my medical career, from the people who come and meet me. Each person is a teacher for me. And I learned that the people who are looking for beauty in other people, the people who are helping other people, the people who are useful to other people, they are the happy people. They fall sick less number of times. They contribute to the other people. And they are more productive. They have better performance. And they are more successful in life. And this was a message I consistently noticed, I consistently saw in the people who are coming to meet me. And I wanted to share this with the world. And that's why I'm in the speaking arena today.
So Any event or anything which actually made you get into this area? You are basically a practicing doctor, but this is something which is different.
Yeah.
So what made you get into this?
So your Atul story is very much like my story. And at the age of 28, I had two children. I was not a practicing doctor. I was working in the medical college as an associate professor. My husband and I, we were making our home and we were paying our installments with the money that we were earning from the job. And one fine day, I was dropping my children, my 1-year-old in my left arm and my 3-year-old holding my right hand. And I was dropping them to the babysitter. And when I reached the station, I saw my train at a distance. And I scooped up my 3-year-old one and I started running. And when I started running, I fell flat on the ground and I broke my ankle. There was complete pandemonium. People lifted me up, but that breaking of my ankle made me lie down on the hospital bed. And that was a turning point in my career.
Great. So this is pretty kind of a turning around kind of a story. Yeah. So since we are going to talk about this and a lot more, so let's kind of pull it back and start by trying to define what is stress or pressure, which we all talk about, but basically, do we understand what is the intricacy behind it?
So we want everything in life. We want name, we want fame, we want money, we want love, we want happiness, but we don't know how to get it. And when we don't get something, we are stressed. It could be a simple thing like a compliment from somebody. It could be a cup of tea from somebody. We expect something, and when we don't meet that expectation, we are stressed. It's as simple as that. I have a little boy in my house. He is going to school. And if his teacher doesn't say something nice to him, he's stressed. So stress is an inherent part of life. How we deal with it is up to us.
So are all forms of stress negative or bad? Or there could be some stress which is actually good for us?
So when I fell down, let me tell you, it was a message from the universe that you're going too fast. Why don't you slow down? And this message was coming to me from inside of me. My heart, my mind was telling me, my soul was telling me, Alka, you're running too much. And I was in fact nicknamed as a rushing mom because I was running and running and running. And that was the time that I realized that there was something wrong. I have to take charge of my life. And I just gave up my job. Now that kind of stress was pulling me apart. And today also, if you see the routines that we are having, that is a bad stress. That's a bad stress which is actually tearing our routines apart, which is tearing us apart. Because there's too much of competition, too much of ego. And I think even at that time, the ego was that I want to achieve something. I want to show something. But life is not about showing anything to anybody. We are wrestling and wrestling and wrestling with our own selves. And I believe that that was my mindset at that time. But when I resigned my job, when I gave up my job, when I sat and I was playing with my children, and then I was setting up my own clinic at that time, that kind of stress became a more purposeful stress. That was also a stress to go to my house, to leave my job, to prepare my house, to build my house without money. That was also a stress, but that was a very purposeful stress. And there was not kind of that negative stress. Negative stress is the stress of ego, the stress of competition. We're not supposed to be there. If something that we work hard, but makes us happy that we are working hard and we are going in the direction that we want to go. So what is it that you really want? Is a question that you have to ask yourself. I wanted to be a good doctor, and I got a purpose in my life when I was lying down on the bed and I was thinking that I want to be a good mom also. That was my purpose I found.
Correct. So basically, let's have an example. We are going through our motions, daily life. Now, how do you differentiate? Is there a way to kind of really kind of differentiate saying, okay, I'm stressed, but this looks to be a kind of a stress which will help me, or this is a negative stress which is going to affect my health?
So I think the answer to that is you close your eyes and you can feel it. When you're going through a competitive stress, a prideful stress, you feel uncomfortable. Stress, when you go to the stage, like I'm coming here, before I started talking to you, I was stressed. And those hormones are good for me. When you're going on stage, when you want to perform, there's a performance stress. And the cortisol and the epinephrine is going to rise. The sympathetic activity is going to rise. And that's a temporary phase. And once you start talking, it comes down. That's a good kind of a stress. But the chronic stress I'm talking about, which is all the time I'm there, I have to go to work. Now I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to compete, I have to show off. It's a showing off stress most of the times. It's not something which is giving us happiness, but it is for the happiness of outside. So I say the life is like an iceberg. The 20% of the iceberg is looking up, is visible. And we are living only that life. That is a very, very bad stress. The life which we are living below the iceberg, 80% of the life is below the iceberg. We're not living that life. And if we deal with our internal pains, with our internal chaos that we are having inside of us, then the stress will become easy. So I'm saying the inner life is very, very important. And if you start dealing with your inner life, the stress is going to become easy. That's also a stress, but that's a purposeful stress, a loving stress, and becoming a better person. If you understand what you really want in your life, that will help you to decrease your stress.
Right. So you talked about iceberg. Okay. And the 80% is not visible to us or known to us, in fact. So how do you kind of figure out what is that 80%? Actually, that is the key, I guess.
I'll give you an example. I have a little 3-year-old boy in my house, my grandchild. My son is like Atul, highly worked. In the evening, we're all sitting and we're playing with the child. The child wants attention. We are hardwired for attention, acceptance, love, acknowledgement, everything. He comes home, he opens the door and he calls the baby. The baby is not interested because baby is having attention of us. He goes quietly to his room. I go and sit with him. I ask him, what happened? He's very sad. So I said, listen, you got to spend more time with the little baby. The connect between you and the baby is not there. The oxytocin has to be created. Now, what is oxytocin? Oxytocin is a cuddle hormone. It's a love hormone. And how do you create it when you have two people talking to each other, when you have two people interacting with each other, engaging with each other? Now, my question to everyone today here, the youngsters or the elders, how much are we engaging with other people in our lives? How much time are we engaging? The 80% what I'm talking about inside is you feel that emptiness in your life. You have everything. You have all the things you want. Money hai, gaadi hai, bangla hai, all those things you have. But you don't have your ma with you. You don't have a child with you. You don't have so many things with you. And that emptiness is the answer to your problems. You have to go deep down and ask yourself, what do I want? And then strive for that. And that's what he started doing. He started spending more time with the baby. And now the relationship between the two is good. He's also happy. So what he has to do? Reduce his work. Because if you're spending more time with your child, your wife, your mother, your father, you have to reduce your work. Somewhere you have to draw a line, something. I don't think you can ever get a full balance, but at least you will get some happiness inside your life.
Yeah, correct. So let me give you some scenarios from my life and from others, just to kind of understand whether it's a healthy stress or it's not a healthy stress. So, for example, somebody, as you mentioned earlier, somebody has to speak at an event, a big event, and that person is preparing for it. And then just before the speech, that person is feeling very stressed. It's like shaking his legs and all. Is that healthy or not so bad kind of a stress? What it is?
So, hilna to nahi chahiye. I don't think you should be shaking and all that, but the stress is felt inside. Every time you go on the stage, there are butterflies, no matter how many years you've been speaking. But over a period of time, you practice and you rehearse and you become strong at it and you become good at it. So the butterflies become slightly less. They're there. But I don't think that one should be trembling. The trembling part is a little bit of an imbalance. So that becomes unhealthy. The healthy stress would be, I'm stressed. Let me go on stage. Let me start talking. And then the stress becomes less.
So trembling could also be because that person is not prepared well enough.
Yeah.
Could also be possible.
Yeah. Then there's no answer to that. You have to prepare yourself.
You have to prepare yourself.
वो तो करना ही है. There's no shortcut to preparation and to rehearsal. Yeah.
Correct. Second scenario. I'm sleeping and in the middle of the night, I wake up and just look at my phone. Is there a new mail or a new message?
This is a disease. This is not stress. This is an addiction. The biggest addiction in life is food. The second addiction is your phone. You have to get out of addictions. You can't afford to be addicted to anything in the world.
Yeah. And the third one is, there's a person called Rajiv. And he is very successful. But he's always worried that what if my company shuts down? Okay. And because of that, in spite of all the success he has in his career, he's very, very worried. and he's not able to sleep, he's not able to go to social gatherings in spite of all the things which he has. What kind of stress is this?
See, our mind is negatively biased. Worry is our inherent nature. It's a universal nature. It's a country's nature. But I would say that we die 1,000 times or million times before we actually die because of the worries and worries. The things don't even happen in our life. So it's a bad habit. And I think what I'm actually talking about in life is to control your mind. As a child, I was taught everything starts with the mind and everything ends with the mind. So mind is the main, it's a creator of problems. So it will make you think, and your primitive brain, there's a primitive brain and there's a prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the action brain. When you start doing the work that you really want to do, the piche ka brain, the primitive brain, the reptilian brain, the lizard brain becomes very quiet. Now the lizard brain is always telling you, ye nahi hoga, this you cannot do, you're not good enough, and all the negative things. It's a vigilance brain. So it's always going to tell you, ye nahi ho sakta hai, this is wrong, this is wrong. But you have to start taking the action in such a way that you quieten that primitive brain. It's a habit. It comes only when you take action. So I say massive action is the key to negative thinking and for worrying. Worrying endless. So you got to start doing something in your life, maybe one step at a time. If you're having this company, whatever you're having, start looking at it in a different way. Start approaching it in a different way. If you're doing your work well, why should it go bad? The scenarios can go bad. The pandemonium has shown, the lockdown has shown us things can go bad. The unknown can come. But you have to be strong from within yourself. Yes, whatever happens, I'm there to take care of it. So making yourself strong is very, very important.
So what happens if somebody is suffering from chronic stress? What is the long-term impact on health, mind, all of that?
See, short-term stress, cortisol is there. It goes up, it comes down, end of matter. But long-term stress is like Atul. He's working and working and working and working. And what are we working for? We got a house, we got a car, we got a Mercedes, we got a beautiful bungalow. Now what? Now what? There's no end to what we want. At the end of it, because of your working, and your ambition, and no time to relax. No rest is there. Absolutely no rest is there. We need the rest for bringing the cortisol levels down. And the cortisol levels down, they're not coming down and they're still high. These cortisol and epinephrine levels in your bloodstream are causing inflammation in your body. They're causing inflammation in your blood vessels, in your arteries, in your heart, in your brain, in your kidneys, and the damage is happening in your body. One fine day we hear 32-year-old boy from Microsoft falling dead. Why? Why this is happening? Because of the heart problem. The heart is affected, the arteries are affected. Nobody is realizing this. There's no pain, no. Now what I'm trying to say is that this chronic stress can be broken. And the antidote to cortisol is oxytocin. Oxytocin is a love hormone. It is the cuddle hormone. It's the intimacy hormone. In America, they're giving you small things to put in your nose to increase your oxytocin levels. But in India, we don't need it. We have people, we can hug people, we can talk to people, we sit with. You should have one friend in your life with whom you can share all your problems, with whom you can share all your tensions, office tensions, ghar ka tension, office, children tension, or wife tension, whatever you have. You can share. You should have one that's called your yellow, or you can say your pink, or your buddy. One person should be there, or maybe two persons should be there. It could be your wife, it could be your daddy or mommy, anybody. So when we have that person in our life, we offload our stress on that person. But if we don't have that person, then we are stressed. And when we offload, we increase our oxytocin levels. Oxytocin is antidote to cortisol. That's all is missing in our life. If our mental health is declining today, the reason is we are sacrificing little joys in our life. We're not spending time with the little things that we could be spending. If a young boy is telling me that I don't have time for my mother is shouting at me, I said, your mother doesn't need time. He was showing me, my son's friend was showing me his timetable, that my mother is not talking to me because I don't spend time with her. I said, she doesn't need your time. So you can just give her a flying kiss. You can just say, hi mama, how are you? Aapne khana khaya kya? That's all she needs. So you have to create your oxytocin in your life every single day. How you do it is up to you. It is to antidote to the stress hormone.
Actually, that was the next question. As to somebody who is like in that situation, which we described earlier, you had described, that chronically not finding time, not having the proper sleep, where do they start? Because fundamentally changing immediately the timetable and everything is not possible. So where do you start? Like these small things. This is one way. What else they can do?
See, today, if you can have one meal, I'm not saying every day together, but start thinking of having one meal 2-3 times in a day together with your family. If you're staying with your wife, if you're staying with your parents, depending on where you're staying, how you're staying. Having a call, you can make a call. If your mother is not with you, you can talk to her. You can send her a message. Today, there is so much you can do. It's not like my dad used to write letters. He had, and I write letters. If I have my son's anniversary, I write a letter to him. If I have my son's birthday, I write a letter. In fact, I was in New Zealand and my husband's birthday was there here. So I was writing a letter for him. So it's about how you communicate your love for the other person. It doesn't matter that time is not important. How much time you spend is not important. Your intention is important. See, every conflict in life is a need for love. It's a need for closeness. It's a need for, if you see any fight in your house now, if your wife is saying something to you, and I'll tell you one more thing. In my clinic, when a woman is coming and telling me she has backache, and we do all the investigations. She's having backache for 1 year, let's say. And we do all the investigations. Everything is normal. MRI, CT scan, everything is normal. Then what do we say? I always say one thing. I say that I don't listen to what the patient is telling. I listen to what the patient is not telling. What the patient is not telling is, it's a cry for closeness that my husband is not listening to me. My husband is not talking to me. It's the same with the husband also. The husband will have some other kind of a problem. These are called psychosomatic disorders. When we have so much of stress inside of us, our psycho, our mind, our soul is crying for closeness. You see any fight anywhere, it's a cry for closeness and for care. And when we start showing the care to the other person is all right, you are also feeling better. When you show care for the other person, your oxytocin level increases and his oxytocin level also increases.
So you're talking about psychosomatic issues. There also, it's all about oxytocin.
Yes.
Primarily that is...
And dose. It's all about dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin and endorphins. Everything comes...
These are pleasure hormones.
Yes, happy hormones.
Happy hormones.
And today, one more thing I want to tell you is because of the junk food, because of lack of sleep, because of fighting, because of resentment, because of bitterness, hatred, jealousy, we are killing our nerve cells in our brain. So let's say we are born with trillions of nerve cells in our brain. But today, if you know, our nerve cells are declining, the number is declining. The only way to increase the factor in the nerve cells is to increase the BDNF. It's called the brain-derived nerve factor. And the nerve cells will only increase if you're in a loving mood, if you're useful to others, if you're contributing to the lives of others. Only then it is going to increase. All this negativity is going to decrease the number of nerve cells. Today, Alzheimer's and dementia are coming at a very early age. So then, this is all because of stress, chronic stress. It's not only heart disease, it's the brain damage also which is happening. So if we really want to take care of our brains, if you want a longer life, if you want a happier life, then you got to indulge with people.
So just to kind of get into that, the stress can also cause Alzheimer's and these kind of brain diseases at an early stage. So what happens actually behind the scenes? If you can explain simple terms, these are going to have medical jargons, but if you can explain simple terms, if it possible.
So I'll tell you, my professor of endocrinology, Dr. Bhandarkar, for example, he's working in the clinic, right? Now, one day he falls. He has a fall. He was elderly, and then we make him sit at home. We tell him ki you can't go to work. And in his house, over a period of 3 years, maybe he has declined so much. The nerve cells need activity. Your prefrontal cortex needs activity. You need to talk to people. You need to activate them. If you're sitting quiet, the nerve cells are going to deteriorate. If they're deteriorating and if they're dying every single day, the Alzheimer's and the dementia is coming early. The number of nerve cells inside your brain determines the health of your brain. The nerve cells also have got fibers. So इसमें ये है कि the bigger the brain, the better is the quality of the brain. But if we are not using our nerve cells, if we are quiet and if we are only doing work, then we are killing our nerve cells. And as the nerve cells number is decreasing, the dementia and the Alzheimer's is coming at an early age. It doesn't start at 50 and 60, it starts at 30.
So is it going to be help if we try to learn something new?
Absolutely.
Do a degree or do a certification?
Absolutely. So there is a part of neuroscience called neuroart. as we say that there's an artist in every human being. We all are born artists. And you will all remember that when you were children, you were artists. You were performing all the time. And there was so much of creativity in you. And it was a moment of a second that you could start saying whatever you wanted to say. And you were not scared of anybody. But as we are growing, as we are studying, we are doing medical college, we are doing engineering college, we leave behind the creativity, we leave behind the art. So when we do art, the parts of our brain, they light up. There's a party happening in the brain. You're singing, for example, you're singing. So many parts of your brain are lighting up. You're dancing, you're learning to dance. Any new skill that you learn, you're learning to speak English, you're learning to learn a new language, a Spanish or something like that. Whatever you like, you're learning to read, you're learning to write, anything that you, creative writing, for example, when you give you a prompt and then your brain lights up, you start writing. So all these things are helping to develop your brain. Whatever you have, hobbies, today hobbies are lost. We have to have something to keep us going. It could be playing the mouth organ, it could be playing the flute, anything. It could be painting, cooking, for example. I've seen my uncle, he cooks all the time and he's always feeding everybody and he's always happy.
So the problem is, or let's have example, somebody who is like into a chronic stress stage. Now the question is, how does somebody try and figure out what kind of things he or she likes, or what could be his or her hobby?
Go back to 14 years, 15 years when you were. Ask what were you doing that time. कुछ ना कुछ तो करते ही होंगे ना. They must be doing something in their school time, in their college time, drama, they must be doing singing, they must be doing some activity they must be doing. I remember I had this lady, she was taking 138 units of insulin. She was stressed like anything. 100, and she was only 31. And she had a little baby at home. And she was stressed because she has to take insulin, she has to cook for the house, she has to cook for herself, she has to go for a walk and she has to come back. She was very overwhelmed with her own health. I just asked her one question. I said, what do you do when you're free? She said, free? I'm never free. I said, but you have to take out some time, right? And I said, what were you doing when you were 13 and 14? She said, I used to paint. I told her husband, buy her canvas and paint today. And next time when she came, there was a glitter in her eye, there was a bounce in her walk, and she was a different person. That hobby that you are doing in yourself gives you inner happiness, gives you those chemicals. It lifts you up, automatically lifts you up. So what you're saying is absolutely true. The art. So the boy who is very stressed out, he can think, what is it that he likes to do? Even if you do 1 hour in a week, I'm not saying do every day, but you'll start liking it. Let's say you start with 10 minutes in a week, then you make it 15 minutes, then you make it 20 minutes. You yourself will start liking it. You will see the effects on your body, on your mind, on your soul. And that will change your life.
Correct. So another topic which you have mentioned, sleep. Sleep deprivation is a big problem. And I see a lot of news articles coming on this. So can you explain what happens to our body if we are sleep deprived for a long period of time?
So when we're sleeping, our body is resting. Each and every part of the brain, the heart, the kidneys, the liver, we need rest. We are working. Now today what's happening is, we don't want to sleep early. The basic problem of sleep deprivation is we don't want to sleep early. And the magnetic rays which come from the phone, even if you switch off the light, we are keeping the phone by the side and we're peeping into that phone. And it's an addiction basically. So the habit has to be that I want to be healthy. Like what James Clear says is that what kind of person I want to become. Even I'll give you an example. Sleep to hai hai, sleep, but supposing one person is coming for diabetes, sugar reduction. It's not the sugar reduction, it's not the weight reduction, it is not the sleep ka problem. It's about what kind of lifestyle you want to have. You have to have a healthy lifestyle. You sleep early so you'll be fine. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about indulging in those habits every single day so that you have a good lifestyle. Eat healthy, sleep early, get up on time, and discipline yourself in such a way that you are working properly. Otherwise, that stress is going to eat you up. So the first thing that I say about sleeping early is, at night, after 6 p.m., put the lights low, have an early dinner. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, finish your dinner. Now you will say, we are not coming back so late from office, so have a heavy lunch, whatever, and by evening just have a little bit of snack. Not necessary to have a snack also nowadays. If you want to sleep early, you cannot have a late dinner and then go to sleep. If you're sleeping so late, if you want to sleep early, let us say by 10 o'clock, you start thinking of sleeping at 10 o'clock, then you sleep at 11 o'clock. So if you're going to come home and have a dinner at 9:30 and then you go to sleep at 11, that's very unhealthy. It's hardly 1.5 hours and you're not even walking, you're just sitting in front of the TV and then you're going to sleep. So I'm saying eat early, sleep early. And that's a habit. It comes slowly, slowly. It doesn't come in one day. You have to make it a habit every single day. And eating early and sleeping early comes when you are having that habit of becoming that person who is disciplined. It's a slow process. Introduce small, small habits every single day in your life.
Correct. So it's something which you have to start putting in effort, like, because this is not going to happen immediately. You are some of the days you still have long hours in the office. I mean that could destroy
That's
the
okay.
discipline, but you
That's
have to
okay.
keep at it and keep doing it on
That's
a regular
okay, yeah.
basis. Yeah, okay. So this was about the sleep and how to kind of do activities which can help you release more happy hormones so that you can become less stressed. Now let's talk about emotional intelligence. Okay, because that is something which many people believe that it is the solution to all these stress problems. Okay, but let's clarify all of that and understand what is emotional intelligence to start with.
As a child, my dad always told me one sentence, Mil jul ke rehna hai. That sentence is emotional intelligence. You are in the office, whether you're at home with the family, with the extended family. I have 2 daughters-in-law in my house and we are all living together. So it's about getting along with people. And there I say only one thing, and that is to be like water. My father trained us to be like water, to be resilient, to be getting along, means to be flexible. It's not that my way is the only way. There are thousands of ways you can do one particular thing. Your way is also right, my way is also right. You cannot say only my way is right. So the first and the most important thing about emotional intelligence is to crush your ego. If you keep your ego if you're standing at a pedestal and talking to people, there's zero emotional intelligence. The second is empathy. Whether you're talking to your patient, whether you're talking to your friend, whether you're talking to your family member, your mother, your father, or whoever you're talking to, if you have no empathy in your heart, you can't reach out to that person. You have to see that you are useful to somebody else in your life. Are you contributing to the lives of others? Are you helping people? For example, today, you are helping people. You call me here all the way and you're taking my interview and you're spreading the word to the world. I think that's one thing that is your contribution to the world. So when you do that kind of thing, you feel happy. I'm feeling happy, but that makes you happy, and the dose chemicals and your BDNF, the brain-derived neurotropic factor, is increased in your brain. Your brain is having a better quality. So I would say only one thing, that emotional intelligence is about getting along with people and loving people and engaging with more number of people.
So you mentioned empathy also while discussing emotional intelligence. So empathy is about understanding others' point of view, or what is empathy?
I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
When I fell down at that time and my children were falling ill again and again, I used to go to meet my professor. He just died recently, Dr. Lokeshwar from Sion. He sat me down. He said, "What are you doing, Alka? You're killing yourself and you're killing your children. The health of your children is falling because you're stressed. The stress in you is going to the children. And you're not even realizing it." And I had not realized it because I was only driven to achieve something. Hyperachiever, like that. But when he made me sit down and he showed that he cared for me, that was the first time in my life I understood what is the meaning of empathy. When I became a doctor, my grandfather, who is Dr. Dharmendra, my husband's grandfather, he was a leprosy doctor. He was a head of leprosy, and in his name there is a leprosy antigen. He wrote a note for me, just empathize with the patient. I never understood the meaning that time. But when this Dr. Lokeshwar, he sat me down and he made me understand, he cared for me. He showed me that what are you doing with yourself? That I decided I am going to be like Dr. Lokeshwar. I am going to empathize with the patient. I am going to show that. And the patient, when the patient is coming to us, or anybody for that example, he is coming to us and we are hardwired to be seen, to be heard, to be acknowledged, to be noticed. And that's what the patient needs. The patient doesn't need your medicine. He needs that he should be heard completely. What his problem is. If you say, na, you have no time, then you're a very bad doctor. And this Dr. Lokeshwar, he taught me what is empathy. And empathy is just about listening what the person is telling. Listening not with your ears to respond, but listening with your heart and to understand what he's telling. You don't have to give any solutions to his problem, but it's just about making him feel seen and heard and valued.
Yeah. So I looked at empathy from a different side. So in our software industry, okay, when somebody goes and talks to the client
Yeah.
to understand what do they want, so there they are told that you need to empathize with the customer. It's exactly the same thing. So you need to
Exactly.
understand, kind of put in his or her shoes and try and understand where is the client is coming from.
What's his problem?
What's his problem? Okay. So now we talked about a patient and a doctor and a client and a vendor. Now let's talk about same situation with my boss, with my colleagues. So how do we apply this empathy, or what could be the scenarios?
So I've had a lot of situations in my medical college when I was also studying. And I think the answer to that is the boss, the leader, he has to be a servant leader. My father was a servant leader. I remember in Bharat Vikas Parishad when he was having an event, he used to get up early morning, get up, dressed up, and I used to go with him and he used to go on the stage and see everything is all right. And I used to tell him, Papa, you're so old. Why are you doing all this work? Let the youngsters do. He says, wait, they will be coming now. And they used to all come. And they used to say, Aap utariye, you come down, I'll do all the work. So a servant leader is not a leader who commands respect. He doesn't demand respect. He knows what he is doing. It's about training the people. This is the work that you're supposed to do. And without saying a word, he would do it. My husband is I would say is a servant leader. My husband is an endocrinologist, but he doesn't ask respect from anybody. He doesn't command respect. He does the thing. And I'll tell you, these people who are great leaders, they're empathetic. They understand the problem of the juniors. They talk to the people in their company, wherever they are. Today, I'll tell you that I have learned to sit and have lunch with my people every single day. The reason is not only to have connection with them, not only to know what is happening around I'm an entrepreneur. I'm running my clinic for 40 years now. So that is one thing, but I also like the lunch of my girls who are bringing the lunch. The South Indian lunch I really like. But that is one reason, but I like to talk to everybody. So a leader has to be understanding the problems of these people. And if you don't ask them, how is your mother? How is your father? How are you? They're not going to be attached to you. If you're only worried about profit in your company, how the hell are you going to make a relationship with these people? If you ask my mother, I bet everywhere my mother is coming. I remember when she came into my building, when she entered the lift, she used to ask, Mishra ji, how is your family at home? And when my mother died, he told me, he said, Madam, आपने कभी नहीं पूछा हमारे घर में मम्मी पापा के बारे में. आपकी मदर हमेशा पूछती थी. It's a small thing. It's a very small sentence. It's about caring for the other person. It's not about acting. It's about really truly asking that person, how is the people at home? How is your family? Oh, your son fell down the other day. He had a fracture. How is the fracture going? It's just about showing that concern for that other person. So I would feel that is the role of a good leader.
Correct. Now let's talk about from the employee subordinate perspective. So a subordinate gets a pretty demanding boss. So whatever you do, still something else was to be desired and you haven't done your job. How do you deal with this situation? Because this is something which is happening quite a lot in today's world. Because the targets is like a moving goalpost. Today you have to get 100K, tomorrow you have to get 200K. So how do you deal with this situation? This is a pretty serious problem in today's world.
I have only one answer to this, that what do you really want in your life? That question has to be answered by the individual in the team. If his boss is very bossy, what do you really want? How much affected are you by that boss? It's very easy to say, don't get affected, become strong and all of that. It's not so easy to actually do it. But there are very few people in this world who really know what they want in their lives. And I've seen in my own office when I was in the medical college, we had a boss who was very bossy. Out of 15 people, 2 would leave and go, but 13 would stay. Out of 13, 2 would leave and go. Another 11 would stay. So those 11 people, I would study them and I saw that they were the people who were satisfied with their lives. They were not bothered about what he was finding faults with them. So one more thing I've seen is that the fault finder boss is not all that bad a boss. He's trying to improve the people. And if you try to see that why is he behaving like this, and if you can have a conversation with him, not easy, I'm saying, but some of them have done it in my life. I've seen people dealing with a toxic boss and actually, telling him something very nice, that actually, you are very nice, sir, but this little problem of yours is making you bad. He changed. That boss changed. Not everybody might change, but you have the guts and to have that relationship with that boss to make yourself very low and go and sit with him and tell him one sentence. And it is about showing their love for that person. See, that person may also be going through some journey. We don't know. We don't look like our journey. If I'm dressed like this, I don't look like my journey, what I've gone through in my life. The boss doesn't know. We don't know what he has gone through in his life. So it's about sitting with him and having that conversation. I've had such conversations with my bosses, and it has changed the way they look at life. So it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. It's up to you what you want to prioritize in your life. Do you really want to work on the relationship with your boss, or do you want to leave? Today people leave the faster, but I would say it's a question of working on yourself and working on your boss. Jim Rohn always said, working on yourself is more important than working on your business. But I would say that it is correct, working on yourself. So you see yourself, what you want in your life, and then compare yourself with the boss and whether you can communicate with the boss and ask him and show him some love, some little bit of love. I think love changes a lot of things. Love melts mountains.
So that reminds me one more question. Okay, so I teach also. Okay, so one of my students, so she's working for an IT company. So I generally ask questions in the class. So I asked her, when your client keeps on asking, you do this, I want this, and I want that, what do you do? She said, okay, since he's a client and they're paying money, we have to do whatever he says. Then is he happy? So she said, no. He is still very demanding, and he keeps on saying that you are not doing what I expect. So what to do, I don't know. So that is also a kind of a stress which people are having right now, because they approach a particular situation in a way which leads to a lot of stress or anxiety or problems. Okay. Now, in those scenarios, so my technical answer or my professional answer was different. But let's say if I ask you this question, how do you deal with this situation? Or how do you kind of approach this kind of a scenario?
So we face it all the time. So I'll give an example. It just comes to my head right now. My husband comes home one day. He is at Hinduja Hospital. He's carrying a folder, a sleeve. And I open the door for him and I look at the sleeve and there's a complaint. There's an email on the top of it. Dr. Chadda, what have you done? All wrong treatment you have given me. So I look at my husband and I say, you never told me what happened? He says, just turn the sleeve and see. So 3 months after that, there is a letter from the patient. I'm sorry, somebody told me that this is the wrong treatment, so I did what I did. So people are people. People get swayed by so many things in their lives. Our expectations are very high. Some people go to a hotel. I'll tell you, we went for a wedding recently. I enjoyed the place. I enjoyed the wedding. And as I was coming down in the train after that, the person sitting next to me was from the same wedding. He was complaining and complaining and complaining and complaining. And I'm thinking, like, when did this happen? I never found any mistake in the wedding. I enjoyed myself. So your priority is what? Your client can be demanding, but you are giving value and you are doing your best. If you're doing your best and if you're giving the value, I don't think you should worry about anything. No matter even if he's a client, you can't become like a servant to the client. You can give a client up to a certain level. After that, you have to just leave it. You can't go on and on and on and helping that client in that way. But there will be some client who will never be happy. And you cannot make the whole world happy. That's what his life is all about. So you have to do your best, apni mehnat, and give the value, the maximum value that you can give to the best of your ability. That's the maximum that you can do. And be honest to yourself. That's one thing. As a doctor, I should be honest to myself, give the best of my treatment. So my husband said to me, I'm not bothered. I never reacted to that time. I'm not reacting to now. Today we are living in a reactive world. No need to react. We do our best and relax, enjoy, chill.
No, that's great example, because your husband, what he kept doing is he was doing the right thing and he kept doing it. So ultimately the patient realized that he made a mistake.
Yes.
Right. So basically You keep doing the right thing, which you have to define what is the right thing, and then just follow that. Don't keep reacting to these kind of obstacles.
Truth always prevails.
Yeah, true.
Honesty always prevails. And being honest to yourself, trusting yourself, and that trust has to be developed. How you develop trust with yourself is make small promises to yourself. Little promises and do those promises. Keep those promises. I'm going to show up no matter what. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And those small निश्चय बोलते हैं हमारे हिंदी में. निश्चय करना है, promise करना है और उसको up करना है. And that's how you develop the trust in yourself and you know what you're doing is right.
Correct. So there's another term which keeps coming in, mental resilience. Okay. Is there something called mental resilience?
Absolutely.
Okay. And what is it?
So someone tells you, you're looking very nice. So, okay, I must tell you this. There is in Vedanta, there is a pyramid. Now, if you take a pyramid and if you make it stand by its pointed, the apex, will it stand?
No.
It's like this. It won't stand. I should have got it with me. It will not be able to stand. This kind of a person, there are three kinds of people and three kinds of equilibrium in life. So this kind of a person, he always needs two props on the side. This can't stand like ek aadmi yahan, needs for him to stand straight. This is a person with unstable equilibrium. Means if you tell him something, he'll never be happy, he'll always be unhappy, he'll always find faults and blah, blah, blah. The second is when the pyramid is lying on the ground and you give a compliment. You say, you're looking very nice today. I'm looking so nice. It will be swaying and swaying and swaying for God knows how much time. Now you say something bad to this person, some criticism. So even if it is told 30 years back, it is still swaying. Uska equilibrium aaya hi nahi hai. So the third is when you're standing on the base, the stability comes. When the base and the apex is up like that. So you say a compliment, it moves and it comes back. You say something criticism, it moves and it comes back. So this is the three stages of equilibrium described in the Vedanta. And what they tell us is our aim of life is to go from this unstable to stable. So people who are knowing what is life, what they want, what their priorities are, they are in that stable equilibrium. In between are we people. All of us are in this kind of a thing. Some of us can we stop reacting within 2 hours. Some of them we stop reacting after 2 years. Some of them take 20 years to come to an equilibrium. Point is, we have to learn in our life. Someone told us 30 years back something. We're still holding on to that. What is damaging? It's damaging us, no? So you want to keep yourself light. If you want to keep yourself light, then you be content. And you be in this particular stage where someone tells you something, you don't react to it. You respond to it. You think about it. Is it worth? And I'll tell you, if you take a 24 hours silence when somebody is criticizing you, or you want to react to something, 24 hours I'm saying, or even if you take 2 hours silence time, you realize at the end of that, oh my God, that was so silly. Why should I react to it also? ज़रूरत ही नहीं थी react करने की. And I would also say that when somebody is giving you a criticism, my father always said, keep the criticizers close to you. Keep them close to you because even if there is 0.1% truth in that, change yourself. It's an opportunity for you to improve yourself. If you don't listen to your criticizers, very bad. So what was your question?
The question was, what is mental resilience?
So mental resilience is to coming back to normal as fast as you can. People are going to throw curveballs. People are going to throw big bats at you. So it is your ability to come back to normal. You go down a little bit, but how fast you can come back to normal is what is mental resilience.
Mm. So I remember my boss, one of my bosses used to tell me that, so there was one client who wrote a very nasty email, criticizing me, my work, my team, everyone. So I got very upset and went to my boss. He said, you close the monitor and go and have a cup of coffee. If you want to smoke, go and smoke. Come back and then we'll talk. So obviously, while I was doing all of that, I realized that maybe there are certain points which are good, which is right, the client is right. Maybe there are certain things which he is not. But I was able to think. So giving yourself time is extremely important because if you start reacting immediately, that doesn't show your mental resilience.
वो है ना, between the stimulus and your response, increase the pause between the stimulus and the response. I think Stephen Covey has also mentioned and one more person has mentioned this. So that's exactly what I'm saying. Ki you want to react to something, be quiet. Just be quiet. And it becomes better after 1 hour, after 2 hours. What you're saying is absolutely right.
Correct. So now mental resilience is not something which is like a inborn. It can be developed.
It's a skill.
So how somebody, which is very, very critical in today's world. So how can people start working on this?
Yes. So number one step is stop complaining. You want to complain na? Think. ये बोलना जरूरी है. If it's not necessary, then be quiet. It will happen 10 times, you start doing once. Then 10 times, you start doing twice. It's about negative information. Somebody is telling you something, don't listen to that. Tell them, I'm fasting. I don't want to listen to gossip. I'm fasting. Third is criticizing. Like Socrates said, na, you have to weigh the thing 3 times. Is it worth it? It is truth. Is it the truth? And there were some 3-4 other things were there. When somebody is saying bad things about somebody, do you know it's a truth? Have you actually seen it? Actually, you believe it is correct. No, then I don't want to listen to it. I don't want to say it also. So it is about yourself thinking within yourself. I am not going to complain. I am not going to be negative. I am not going to give an excuse for life in anything, and I am not going to blame anybody. It's called no excuses, no blaming. NENEB. No excuses, no blaming.
Correct. So these kind of situations which people face and where they are expected to show mental resilience. Now, there are people who react currently. Let's say, for example, there is somebody who is very highly reactive. Okay. So they, in anger, they quit and then they repent. Okay. This also happens. Sometimes they fight and react very angrily. So they spoil the relationship. Now they are into kind of a mode where they are repenting what they have done. Okay. So that is also not pretty good if it continues for a long time. So how do people come out of it?
So anger is an issue that we have to take care of it. And it's not, I would not say it's about managing your anger. There was a movie in anger management. I don't believe in that kind of anger management. What was taught to us is you fill yourself with more good things in your life. You fill yourself up, make a habit of complimenting people. Make a habit of appreciating people. If you want to criticize somebody, before that, you see what is good in that person. Sit. In my family, when we had guests in our house, after they went away, it's not that we sit and we say that auntie was not working in the kitchen, that uncle did like that. No. My father said, find out what is good in that auntie and that uncle and the children and discuss that. So that is a habit. You have to, all these things are habits. So if you have to manage your anger, it's about looking at the goodness in people. It's about looking at the beauty in people. It's about looking at the beauty around you. There's so much of beauty around you. We don't want to look at that. We only look at the dirty things and then we get angry. And the first cause of anger is that we have very high expectations of our own selves. Others ka to hai hi hai, but we expect too much from our own self. So when you sit in silence, so a little bit of silence time is required by everybody. Little bit of reflection time is required by everybody. Then why am I getting so angry? Think. Close your eyes and sit with yourself. Any anger is not created by opposite person's behavior. There is something wrestling going on in yourself. Arjuna ke jaise, there's a Kurukshetra going on in our own selves. We don't know what we want. We don't know where we are going. We have so much confusion within our own. We have so much of chaos within our own selves. So that's where we have to settle down. Again, coming to the 80% of the pyramid, down inside. So settle down within yourself first. And then gradually anger will come down. Sitting in silence, doing pranayam, doing some yoga, and exercise is very, very important. Anger is a mental health issue. And it has to be tackled. Sooner it is tackled, better it is.
Correct. So exercise is, I think, I 100% agree because...
Walking, aapne bataya na, your boss told you to go somewhere.
Yeah.
Walking is, all the great people, all the philosophers were doing walking. Walking changes your mindset. The problem that you started with in your house, when you come back, you have got so many ideas. So walking is one of the ways that you can get hold of your anger. Because you start thinking, you go within when you're walking. Not with a podcast in your ear. Please don't take a podcast every time you go for a walk.
So true. So now, to kind of summarize things, how do professionals kind of have ambition, the desire to excel, but at the same time have better control on their lives? I mean, any mantras which you want to share?
Exercise every day, walk, whatever you want to do, eat healthy, sleep well, discipline. Your internal discipline is very, very important. See, if you're not disciplined, when your exams are coming and you're playing the whole year, and then when your exams are coming, you want to study, it's not going to work. The discipline is very important. Whether you're a boss, whether you are whatever work you're doing in this world, in IT also, if you're doing it every single day, and if you're disciplining yourself, sleeping well, having good habits, that is going to reduce your stress.
Correct. And somebody who is like, these are habits to avoid these problems at work. But somebody is like, he's literally drowning at work. Okay. What the first step they have to take to kind of the attempt to get out of that situation?
Spend more time at home with your family. Talk to people. Talk to your mother. Talk to your children. Talk to your wife. Talking. I tell you, talking is like breathing. Talking is like life. It gives you those chemicals which you need. The lack of human connection is what is taking us down today. Talk. Connect with them. Share your problems with people. Have that one buddy or that friend with whom you can share. In India, we don't have a deficiency of people. You have to create relations within your life with whom you can share. If you don't share, then you're drowning inside and you're drowning outside.
I remember I was watching a documentary on blue zone in the world. There are, I think, 5 blue zones. And one of the things which they found is that all the people who live longer and healthier, they had that social connect. They always used to meet people in their community and always to have whatever party or they used to do. So that is very, very important. So somebody can take a break, right?
Of course.
And then connect with the family and friends.
I took a break.
Yeah,
God pushed it on me. I took a break. So contribution to other people's lives is very important. Being useful to the world is very important. Nature is teaching us that. Nature is doing, giving all the time, and it's not discriminating. It is we who discriminate. The sunflower or the rose is giving us the fragrance. It's not saying you didn't water me. The sun is giving us the rays of the light and brightness. It's not saying that you didn't do Surya Namaskar to me. Everybody is giving, no? The nature is giving. So we got to give. This is universal law of nature. If you're not giving, if you're only taking, you cannot be happy. No way you can be happy.
Yeah. So I think that is the very good way to kind of end this, because if you look at the nature, as you rightly mentioned, is that it's the nature of nature to keep giving you without expecting anything in return. So thank you so much for your time today. It was fantastic. And I think this was something which I wanted to do for a long time, that telling people how to kind of have a balance or at least have some control on how you are living your life. Success is important, but at what cost? So I hope this was useful to all of you. And thanks for being with me in this podcast. See you in the next week. Thank you.